have that fucking conversation. I don't care how you start it. You can use me. Hey, I heard a guy on a podcast and all he wants to do is talk about death. Start the conversation some way with the people who matter, whether it's grandparents or parents or siblings or partners, loved ones, friends, whatever. You can't talk about this too much. You can't. You will learn more about that person and what they want for their life and their death. Things become a lot clearer the more this becomes a topic that's you're comfortable with. That's the secret.
Welcome to the Death Science Podcast, where we explore new perspectives on life, death, dying, and the dead. You can find the audio on all major podcast platforms by searching for the show title, Death Science Podcast. Learn more about the show at deathscience.org. Welcome to episode number 12. Today's guest is Derek McCormick. He's an author, blogger, podcaster, and fitness trainer. We talk about his experiences and writings about death, how we can utilize death awareness to live a more fulfilling life. We also call out our culture for denying and suppressing death as part of life, and we talk about so much more. We're also joined by co-host Joshua Seamans. Learn more about him by visiting his YouTube at www.tinyurl.com/wearegodyoutube. But before we get started, I want to talk about catacombculture.com. This is where I sell my sculptures. My sculptures being functional home decor that I make out of hyper-realistic human bones. From human bone lamps to food-safe skull bowls, I make a lot of memento mori-friendly pieces that serve as reminders that our lifespans are limited, so let's make the best out of the time that we have left. You can explore my bone gallery at www.catacombculture.com. Also, restinggrounds.org will guide you in exploring alternative post-life care for your deceased body. Your deceased body has the potential to literally save lives, advance multiple fields of science, and so much more. Learn more at restinggrounds.org. Now let's meet Derek and explore new perspectives on life, death, dying, and the dead. On today's show, we are here with Derek McCormick, aka Grim. He is a professional fitness trainer, and he also, after a death of a loved one, he wrote a book called Tea Time with the Reaper. And because of that, he started getting all this outreach, and so he developed a podcast, Tea Time with the Reaper. Instagram, find him at Tea Time with the Reaper. And so we're here to talk about death and his experiences. Welcome to the show, Derek. How's it going?
Not too bad, gentlemen. I appreciate the chance to chat with you guys about this. It's a topic that most people, as we know, shy away from.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Well, thanks for showing up and coming on. So, tell us about this book that you wrote.
Well, I guess to begin with, the book itself chronicles the 9 years and 4 months that Angela, my wife, and I spent together. We met on August 22nd in 2008. We're together, incredibly happy for many, many years. And then she died on December 22nd, 2017. Now, her death is something that has proven to become a huge catalyst in what I am doing now. As you mentioned, I've been in the fitness space for quite a long time, but after her death, that didn't feel important anymore. I have chosen to try to immerse myself into being a death advocate as much as I can. And so after she died, there was a lot of people wanting to know some details of our relationship, how she got sick, her death, how I was trying to navigate life after her. So instead of repeating myself a million times, I thought, you know what, I need to put this on paper. So wrote the book, published it through Amazon, and as it started to make its way out into the world, people I did not know were coming across it. They were reading it and then feeling compelled to share their stories of death with me. And it's not that I'm I would consider myself an expert or anything like that, but I think because they saw me throw it all out there in a very raw way, they felt comfortable in sharing those intimate details of their loved ones with me.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So, that keeps happening, and it's happening from people in the US, from Canada, the Netherlands, Australia, all over the world. Yeah. And every single time someone shared something with me, I felt honored, because that's craziness. That's just amazing that they were able to share it. But also I felt compelled to try to become a caretaker for those stories somehow, to not necessarily use, but to share those stories, kind of like Angela's, so that people might be able to glean some lessons from that person's life, but also their death. So one night I was having dinner with a friend and former coworker of Angela's, and he suggested to do a podcast. Now, initially I was very hesitant, because I'm not one who wants to be around a lot of people or even be in public most of the time. So that would kind of really put me in a spot I never thought I would be. But then I reminded myself, this isn't about me anymore. Mm-hmm. This is about Angela's legacy, about everyone else's legacy. So over a handful of months, we put together the podcast, sat down with a number of people to listen to their stories, whether it be suicide, the death of a child, unexpected death, or heart attacks, vehicular accidents, that kind of stuff. The podcast got out there, and people were listening, and then again reaching out and sharing more stories and connecting with other people who've kind of been in a similar situation, for some kinship and some comfort, knowing that they're not alone in this.
Absolutely. Yeah. In my experience, like, some of the most painful events in my life have turned into the most powerful motivators. That's the case for a lot of people I know. And going back to what you said about, it no longer being about you, like that's the whole essence of death. I mean, death is really at its core just the dissolution of this personality and body and life that we've built. And then when we die, this body, this story, just it ends, but at the same time it doesn't, because the impact that we made on the external world continues to ripple out. And so really, in a sense, like, she is still living through you. Like, her essence, her spirit is still living through you. It's made such a profound impact on you, and that is just so clear to see. And I mean, just hearing you talk about this and the global outreach that you've inspired to talk about this taboo yet so important topic. I mean, it's powerful medicine, and I just want to say thank you for having the courage and the strength to transform all that pain. Like, I've had a lot of experiences losing loved ones, losing friends. One of my best friends growing up, he hung himself in a fort that we played in as kids, and my friends found him. So we all relate to death in our own ways. And I have more death experiences that I don't really want to share right now, but needless to say, I know the aura and feeling of death very well. I'm no stranger to that, and it's a very painful and alien experience to anyone experiencing it for the first time on this side of life.
Yeah. As
a human being who sees everything as like, I'm Joshua, you're Jeremy, and
social identities, and just physical identities.
So, and one of the interesting things there is that it is a taboo subject, and I think because it is, and there's lots of reasons why it is, but I think because it is part of the reason why most people have such a hard time trying to get a grasp of it.
Right.
Like, if you think about it, that is the only common denominator that we all share.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the old saying of, there's two guarantees in life: death and taxes. But we all know there's people who don't pay tax, so that was supposed to be optional.
It's true.
So, but death is it,
Yeah.
and I think one of the biggest challenges with it, because we at present do have very little control over it, and don't know necessarily when it's going to happen, that lack of control makes people freak out. It gets them scared. It gets them fearful of regrets and not actually living, versus accepting it, owning it, and using it as motivation to, in fact, live a more enjoyable life.
Right.
Yeah, that's the conclusion I came to. And hearing your podcast, her mantra, I want what I want when I want it. That mantra, that's something that I kind of live by too. And I found it's really important, like you said, once you experience like the full grip of death, and once you fully realize the true impermanence of everything that we're in right now, literally everything, once you realize that, you could react a couple different ways, but the way I'm reacting, and it sounds like you just said it before, is to use it as a motivator to live a better life, live life to the fullest. Don't get stuck in something you don't want to do, or if you have to do something you're not necessarily thrilled about, at least make time for something that you're passionate about, and that's one of the most powerful cores of my being, really. That's at the center of what I try to do every day.
Yeah, and that's even what I try and do through like my bone sculptures. It's just these little pieces, whether it's a lamp, whether it's a bowl, it's just something, but they're just reminders, maybe on a subconscious level, or like an actual level. It's just reminders that yes, we are all bone, we will all die one day. Just the classic memento mori, remember that you must die.
Right.
As a physical being.
Yeah, the Greek philosophers and doctors, they used to keep a skull on their desk or their workstation or their living quarters as a constant reminder, like, this is what's inside my head. This is what's holding the form for this brain to circulate electrical currents and communicate with this body and use this body to do whatever I want it to do. But really, at the core of it, our spirits are just are just using this vessel temporarily, and when it's no longer suitable, then off we go.
Yeah, and it's interesting that those, let's say, ancient or older societies had this figured out. They understood the fact that this was not going to last forever. That we will at some point die. And I think what's happened over the last, let's say, couple hundred, maybe 1,000 or so odd years, is that we have shifted too far away from that. Life for many has become so easy as far as imminent danger or imminent death that we have lost touch with that, and now we're ignoring the boogeyman instead of using the boogeyman for its intended purpose.
Right.
Well said. Yeah.
What kind of taboos have you experienced as far as like the general public and accepting death, stuff like that?
Wow. Well, what's I found most interesting over the last, say the last couple of years, when Angela was sick and after she died, is the language that people use to describe parts or aspects of this topic. As noted in the book, and I mentioned it in the podcast with people, is that when you say, or someone says they passed away, I take offense to that, in that passing something means you can circle the block and find it again.
Yeah.
Oh, you lost a loved one. No, you lose car keys and you might find them again. They fucking died.
Yeah.
They're gone. They're taken. They're not coming back. But again, this goes back to how our current society has chosen to navigate this topic. They pacify it, they water it down, they turn it into a greeting card instead of being straight up and honest about it. For example, one of the things as far as taboo goes, when people ask what happened to Angela,
Yeah.
I give them an option most of the time of whether or not they want the PC answer or if they want my truth. And if they ask for my truth, as I tell them that I killed her. Because I was the one taking care of her. I was the one who was medicating her.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the medication that stopped her life. It was not cancer. Now, you can try and chicken and egg that. Well, she wouldn't have been on the medication had she not had the cancer. But that doesn't help what goes in my head. I'm the one who was there. I was the one medicating her. So you tell someone, yeah, I killed my wife, you're going to see people squirm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But that is a possibility that everyone may need to face. I would love it for everybody to find a partner and, live a fruitful life and die in their sleep arm in arm. Sounds great.
Fairy tale, Disney story, yeah.
But that shit ain't gonna work or happen for everybody.
Right.
So there needs to be an understanding that it is highly possible that that person who matters to you, that yesterday was the last time you're going to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that mindset, now I wouldn't recommend people thinking about it as much as maybe I do or you guys do, but most people don't think about it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when someone does die, they're at a loss. And whether it's fitness, as we talked about earlier, or learning to drive a car, or preparing a meal, it's about repetition. It's about exposure and understanding the process.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get any better at managing and mitigating the impact of someone's death if you keep your head in your ass the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. I've after losing several loved ones, each time I kind of grew more comfortable with it. And most recently, my grandmother passed away, I believe 1 year ago, if I'm remembering correctly. And a very similar circumstance. She had a tumor, and eventually she wound up in the hospital, very, very ill, on high dose morphine, opiates, painkillers. And my father was the one basically caring for her and his siblings. But like you said, it wasn't the cancer that killed her. It was actually the morphine, because it causes the respiratory depression and central nervous system depression. So like her last breath, from what I heard, I wasn't there, but it was like gargling, because the fluid just fills your lungs, and you can't circulate the oxygen anymore, and the body is, it's time to go. So your spirit just goes.
It's like a slow drowning.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
And when you speak of taboo, this leads into, especially in those cases where it's some type of illness, where heavy medications and procedures and all those things come into effect. Why is it that our society is so against people determining their own outcome?
Right.
That is, why are people so against the concept of dying with dignity, or euthanasia, or suicide?
Yeah,
I don't get it. Like, when I look at my dog, I look at Augie, I think if he ever gets to the point where he is suffering, taking him to the vet after a trip to the beach and some ice cream and a good day, and then we'll put him down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is far more compassionate and loving, as far as I'm concerned. Everybody can judge that on their own, than putting a bunch of tubes in them and hooking up to machines and slowly watching rot away.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Who wants that, really?
Yeah, it goes back to, it's not the length of your life, it's the quality of your life. And at that point, I've thought the same thing many times, contemplating suicide, contemplating death. And I think it would be beneficial for modern society to like fully come to terms with death. And people have a right to live, like they have freedoms in America. Well, there should be like a legitimate freedom to die peacefully, and there should be some sort of science behind it, where scientists determine, okay, this is the most peaceful, painless way. Here, this is, and anyone could design their death according to whatever they want. They could design their passing. They could, go for a journey to a place they've always wanted to go before, and say everything they've always wanted to say, and just plan for that, instead of prolonging something and just trying to sugarcoat it and just prolong it. But I think a lot of it goes back to the medical system wanting to just keep a patient there and just make money from, oh, you were in the hospital for this many days, and
there definitely is a huge capitalistic and greed component to this, but we can't necessarily put all the onus on that, because one, we as society allow that to happen.
True. Yeah.
We allow them to do what they do because for most people, they're afraid to even talk about the concept of their own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't want to do it. Now, if we circled back to the mental health component of, say, those who wish to commit suicide, let's say they're not terminal. Terminal, most people would be on board with. But let's say someone was not terminal. They were just finished with it all. A lot of people are like, oh, no, don't do that. You can't think that. You need help, blah, 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 blah. Cool. But if we said, look, you have an option to die if you wish, regardless of your reason or motivation, but you need to go through steps 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
We would free up people to talk about what's pushing them or motivating them in that direction. You would actually see, in my opinion, a decrease in those people committing suicide, because they would actually be comfortable enough to talk about it and get help that may, in fact, change their perspective and change their mind.
Absolutely.
But everybody's too fucking scared to talk about dying. I've heard stories of grandmothers who, when the concept is brought up in a family discussion, they feel like they're being cursed by their family. You're wishing me to die. Come on. Let's be realistic about it. You're not getting out of this alive. There's no sequel.
Right. I'm
sorry. You have to accept the reality of it. But then people start wondering about, well, maybe I should have done this or should have done that. And it's a complicated issue that there's no perfect way to start, but you have to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I wanted to say about suicide and the way society handles that now. In some ancient cultures, suicide was regarded as a very high honor, to be able to take your own life consciously and be at peace with dying. I mean, some cultures actually regard it as very high honor. Here we regard it as the lowest thing. Oh, there's the whole stigma of cowardice and all that stuff, guilt, and I really understand both sides of it, but where I'm at is having been through all that, the mental health system, having depression, severe depressive episodes, and the way they handle that is basically, now if you say that you have an intent to harm yourself or you're even contemplating it, they'll give you two options. Either one, you go to a mental health facility, inpatient stay willingly, and you sign yourself in, or they will take you there forcibly, and that will remove your right to join the army, it removes your right to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And just for simply saying, I'm contemplating suicide or death, which is something very natural. I feel like a lot of people contemplate it, but they're not coming out of the closet for that reason. But I think a much better approach is kind of what you said, Derek, which is basically you have the right to, instead of automatically saying, no, you're not allowed to do that. You don't know what that person's going through. You don't know how bad it is. I mean, they might, if you were in their shoes, you might want to do the same thing. So I think the much better approach is, like you said perfectly, is open the doorway for communication. Say, okay, we understand the resources are here. If you need help, this is open to you. But if you still choose to leave, that is your choice, and it's okay. I mean, no one can tell you that it's not. I think that's the proper approach I would like to see. Really.
Yeah, and that's just one facet, one category of so many things that falls under the umbrella of death. Like, and
Yeah.
in conversations I've had with both people who've kind of been through the wood chipper, who've experienced someone who mattered to them being taken, and even those who haven't, I suggest that they start using death as their North Star, as their primary point of reference to decisions they make in their life.
Yeah.
You know, you have X amount of time in your day. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to sit and binge watch something, which I've done?
Right, man. I've been there. Yeah.
Or do you want to take a minute or two and go through your contacts and say, you know what, I haven't talked to Bob in a while. Let me just send him an emoji. Let me just tell him, hey, man, thinking about you, hope all is well. You know, no one thinks that way because they think Bob's always going to be there.
Yep.
Just like they think Kobe was always going to be there.
Yeah.
Now, in Los Angeles, which is where I live, the city stopped.
Oh, yeah, I'd imagine.
That news spread so fast, and so many people were impacted by it. But nobody's talking about it anymore. So I'm curious as to how many people who say they were impacted have made a change in their life to appreciate the time they have now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of focusing on before or focusing on maybe tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely live in this culture where it's like it's more acceptable to almost deny death and expect immortality, you know? And so we kind of suppress all these fears, and it results in like almost like a death anxiety, which like plagues us for our entire life, and then it affects our decisions and our abilities to live a more fulfilling life.
Yeah.
So you said LA, everything in LA just stopped when Kobe died?
Yeah, there was that Sunday. I was actually chatting with a guy I know, former Olympic boxer who has a couple gyms here in town, and I had kind of asked him whether or not he's had any real legit sit-down conversations with his wife about life and death. They have multiple kids, you know. He's in a situation where there's obligations in a lot of different directions, and they sort of kind of have, but you know, not to the level that they need to, in my opinion. And I said, you never know.
Right.
Never know who's going to die. And minutes later, the news broke.
Oh.
And I sent him a text. I'm like, what were we just talking about?
Yeah.
And it sucks. There are people who I've spoken to who felt more connected and impacted by Kobe's death than people they actually know on a day-to-day basis. Which, that makes sense. I get it. But what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
How are you gonna honor Kobe and everything that he meant to you now that he's gone?
Right.
Talking about's good, but what are you going to change? Knowing that you could go the same way or at the same speed, because not everybody's going to be flying around in a private helicopter. So.
Right.
Yeah, and that says a lot for our celebrity culture here in the United States. Like how people can relate more to a celebrity that they don't actually know. You know, like they know that the headlines on the news, they see them playing some games and stuff, but it's like you don't know that individual, and yet you feel emotionally connected to him more so than the people around you in your life.
It seems odd, but you know, when thinking about that, I don't see a significant difference between that scenario and the scenario of people feeling connected to some deity or God, as it were.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yep.
You know what? At the end of the day, what's really the difference?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about that embodiment, you know, almost like, oh, like you're lacking, say, those sports skills that you admire, and so you embody part of yourself into this godlike figure. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So really, it's, you know, where are you choosing to find your motivation. What are you choosing to worship, for lack of a better word? Are you worshiping money, and that's the only thing that matters? Are you worshiping a god? I'm not going to say the God, because there's plenty of people who say, no, it's Allah, it's Buddha, it's Jesus Christ, it's whatever. Or are you idolizing someone who performs, whether it's music or some type of acting or theater or sports? I don't want to judge somebody for who they hang their hat on. Just understand why, and how is that making your existence better for yourself and those who matter to you.
Right. So you mentioned that you're a death advocate. So what does that mean to you?
That is kind of the term that I've put together to help illustrate what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
In the big picture, I want people to talk about it more. There's lots of avenues those conversations can go, as our conversation has gone. Healthcare, mental health, just our existence as a whole. I want people to talk about it more. They need to talk about it more, and hopefully get to a point where they realize that they're gonna die, and own it and use it.
Yeah, exactly. And especially planning for life of those around you after you pass is so important, and it's so overlooked. And it's like we said before, how grandmothers, they're all hush hush about it. They don't want to talk about it. Family members don't want to talk about it, and that's understandable. But it's again, it's death denial at that point.
Yeah, I just want to add something. You mentioned grandmothers denying it. My grandmother, who passed away, she was very much in denial. She wanted to always have a smile on her face, always just enjoy life as much as possible, and just focus on the present moment and not think about dying. Even when she was in the hospital, it was something that was always pushed to the side. And I wanted to respect her attitude towards it, because in a sense, you don't want to approach someone who's laying in a hospital bed and just blatantly make it uncomfortable. Yeah. So it was a mutual understanding that, okay, you don't want to talk about this in this way, so we're gonna talk about your memories. We're gonna talk about how life lessons, how you raise us. So in that sense, some people find it more helpful to just say, okay, I'm gonna die, but I'm not gonna focus on that. I'm just gonna focus on okay, what have I learned through life? Whereas my other grandmother, who's still alive, but she's getting up there in age, all she thinks about and focuses on is her impending death, and the whole family is planning for it, and it's this big thing where that's all they're thinking about. I'm like, okay, you're right, you're gonna die, but just focus on enjoying your life.
Exactly.
So there's a balance of okay, appreciate life, but also understand and accept death. And for me, it's a very balanced approach. I don't want to contemplate death too much, and I don't want to contemplate life too much, because then when you cling to life, it's over before you know it. Or when
I think part of that contemplation is the intent behind it. Meaning, if all I do every day is think about my death, is that helping me live my life, or is it keeping me from living my life?
Yeah.
True. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one needs hope in that equation.
Yeah.
And goals and stuff like that.
A core purpose, a driving motivator to build your life around.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that, it's 50 or 50. Some people think about death and they get depressed. Others get motivated. Shit, I only got so much time here. Let's get shit done.
I think that's us. We're in that.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that, because the documentary we're talking about, I think prior to recording, Bigger, Stronger, Faster, done by my buddy Chris Bell, his brother, one of his brothers, died in sober living at a very young age. And one of the quotes from the podcast I did with him is he said that his brother, Smelly, squeezed every ounce of motivation out of Mad Dog's death, became a millionaire because of it. I took all the drugs I could get. Like, you can go two different ways with death. It's not that death's not the problem. It's the use of it, the intent of it.
Right.
Yeah.
That people have the challenge with. But because they don't even delve into that topic, they don't know what to do. It's like taking somebody who's never seen water and throwing them in a pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like cultural conditioning. I mean, at least, you know, we're talking from the perspective of modern America. You know, that's our cultural conditioning. Whereas I think in other cultures, like perhaps in South America, like the shamans in the rainforest, I think they're very in tune with death and going into ceremonies. And the Native Americans were very in tune with it. And more so like the ancient cultures. And this goes back to what we were talking about, how modern luxuries, modern healthcare, you know, our cars, our food, our endless supply of food, we just go to a store. We don't worry about going out for a hunt and following the herds. We don't worry about building a teepee and a fire to stay warm in the winter. You know, we just turn the heat on and get a blanket, go to sleep, wake up the next day, go to work, earn our income, and we're fine. So
absolutely, people are living a life on a credit card.
Exactly. Yeah.
Consume.
That bill is coming due.
Mm-hmm. Yup.
When
Well
you
said.
least expect it.
Yeah. And we see even in especially in comparison to different cultures. Like not long ago, I was scrolling through, mindlessly going through Facebook, and I'm in a couple like weird kind of like bone groups and stuff, and I see someone who shared this video of it's in a different culture, different country. And it's like these people, they unearth a tomb and they crack it open with their crowbars and they exhume the body, and it's all kind of rough, and you know they undo the robes that are encasing the corpse, right? And then they remove the body and they put it into like new fabrics, new sheets, and then they put it back and they put it all back. But in the comments, people are losing their shit. People are freaking out. I can't believe they're doing that.
Right,
It's terrible. These people should be arrested. You know, but then I'm like, well, everybody, hold on. What language are they speaking? So I just quickly, Google Translate, and it's like Southeast Asia. And I'm like, oh, Hindus.
Yeah.
Second burial. I'm like, us in the Western culture, we are so blind to the rest of the world, and we're in this mindset where it's like the way we do it in America and the Western world is the way it needs to be done everywhere.
Right. Yep.
And so we completely go in the black with like other cultures and other societies and other ways of doing it, and we just want to whitewash everything, and it's like, that's sad. I mean, okay, so this post was posted by some like music DJ, just for hype, so he's exploring for like Facebook likes and stuff. I'm like,
Gotcha.
These guys out of their mind. But yeah, it's just death cultures around the world are just fascinating.
And I think there's another aspect to that I don't know if anybody brought up in that post is, if you were to, say, measure happiness and contentment in life of the North American people versus the people in Southeast Asia of that post, I'm going to bet that the people over there probably are much happier with their existence.
Yeah.
Which I believe is 100% in part to the fact that they have a greater appreciation for death than we do here. How many people are really happy here? Yeah. Everybody's bitching and moaning about everything.
Right?
I got the wrong milk in my coffee. I can't believe that guy cut me off. I can't believe my boss is a dick. I can't believe my partner said this. On and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
You want that shit to stop real quick? Kill somebody who's important to them.
Yeah.
Perspective.
I find also it's a sense of entitlement that also like hurts a lot of people into thinking that way.
They haven't been punched in the face.
Right. Yeah. I think in our society, it's a paradox, because America truly is like the melting pot. I mean, we have all these cultures coming in and blending, and yet there's still one dominant hierarchy of culture that permeates America. And for the most part, it's the standard cemetery where you bury the corpse, you forget about it, and people forget the graves even there most of the time, and that's it. And people don't want to face death. Whereas in other cultures, it's so like they have to hand bury it. Like they don't pay anyone to bury it or embalm it or get a tomb for it. It's like up in the caves, everyone carries the corpse up there that's dead and bloated. So it's like a very hands-on approach to death.
Family responsibility.
Yeah, they're always reminded. And then also they don't have, like, we're talking about like the third world countries, they don't have all the material distractions that we have. They don't really have as much access to the internet or pop culture, Hollywood, all these different distractions, movies, cities. They don't have that. They're very in tune with nature, what the basic survival instincts, and death is right there all the time for them. So they're not naive to it at all. So
And that is something we could all use a much better, bigger dose of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So through your interactions with fans of your book, your podcast, are there any consistencies that you find from person to person in their stories and the way that they cope and recover from a loss?
Well, there actually is one, and I was thinking about this earlier. It is the fact that, for the most part, nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about their own pending death, whether it's going to be tomorrow or 20 years from now. But more than that is those who are no longer here. Once someone's died, people go through the motions of their service and doing a social media post, and then they get back on the hamster wheel. They go back to their life, acting like it hasn't happened. They push it aside and remove it from their consciousness in a way that, as far as I'm concerned, is disrespectful to the person who died and doesn't allow them an opportunity to evolve from the lessons that life and death provide. They just don't talk about it. There's one of the episodes of the podcast is about suicide, and when you listen to how the family chose to, quote unquote, deal with it, or more accurately, not deal with it, it's crazy. But I think that happens more than not. I think a lot of people, once somebody dies, they shed their tears, they're hurt. I'm not saying they're not, but they don't live with it. They cast it aside. And as far as the recovery and that sort of thing, the concept of healing really comes up frequently. Of how do you heal from this? And my response, and this is just my opinion, is you don't. And I say that because with Angela, she was taken. Something was taken from me. I have a hole, and no matter what I try to do, that hole cannot be filled. What can happen, though, is what remains, what's left of me, may be able to become strong enough to carry on. It's like if I cut my hand off, no matter how much I want, that thing ain't growing back. I'm not healing from that. The rest of me has to become strong enough in order to continue on. So it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that choices of words, especially associated with someone's death or the concept of mortality, I think are incredibly important because they set the tone for people in how they're going to manage that journey.
Yeah, you articulated it like almost perfectly, or indeed perfectly. I've kind of felt the same way. Like some wounds are so deep, like the metaphor of cutting your hand off. Some things are so damaging to the core of you. It feels like a piece of you is actually eternally gone. And And yeah, man, I totally relate to that. I really do. I feel that. I've actually said the same thing to myself multiple times because of different things I've gone through. And I think that there's this whole attitude. of trying to, well, first of all, since we live in a materialistic society where it's 9 to 5, you know, everyone's in a rush to make money and survive and impress others, you know, I think the tendency is, you know, people feel the pain of the loss, and unless it really hits them on a core level, unless they're actually receptive to it on a core level, on a spiritual or core level, whatever you want to call it, then it's just gonna kind of like hit them, chip a piece off, and they're gonna develop some coping mechanism. Maybe they're gonna up their dose of painkillers, maybe they're gonna drink more, maybe they're gonna do whatever, some unhealthy coping mechanism, because they're trying to numb this inner wound or pain, and they're just trying to distract themselves to move on and just stay in the present moment and focus on what they think they have to do instead of just dwelling on this pain. And there's no blame in that. It's just the natural human tendency. When we feel pain, we wanna mask it up. But sometimes the pain is telling us like, hey, there's something wrong here. You need to heal this pain. But that goes back to, you know, healing. I've had wounds in me for a long time, very, very deep scars, very deep wounds, like pieces of me gone. And I've always, for a long time I was obsessed with like, how do I heal this? How do I come to terms with it? How do I reach nirvana? How do I do this? And I was like obsessing over this perfection and healing that has to take place. But I think the most powerful healing is when you actually just let go and you just accept, as painful and shitty as it might be sometimes, or even most of the time, you just accept the flow of life, and you just, like you said, really what's left of you flow on with some sort of central purpose to build your life around. I think that's been like the most powerful thing for me, despite having gone through a lot of pain, which we all go through. We all have our own suffering. The one thing that's kept me going is, okay, this happened, but what's my purpose? What am I going to carry on and bring to myself and bring to others? What purpose do I have in this life? Because I could leave any moment. No one's holding me here. I could leave whenever I want. But, you know, if I have a purpose, if I have something to strive for in life, something that makes me want to live, want to be here, then I'm here.
Right.
So, yep.
Yeah, and I find, especially like legacy, like personal legacy development is, you know, pretty powerful stuff where you could really, like, I find it where it's like, how can you help others, you know, like personally, you know, like where do you find the most joy in helping others? Because everyone needs help, you know, like you will never run out of work if you're trying to help others do something. Yeah. You know, and so
however, going back to our kind of overview of the first world society, is most people want to know what they can do for themselves. What can the business do for them? What can the government do for them? Very few people ask what that government or that business or themselves can do for others.
Right.
It's a completely different priority and perspective, which those people are conveniently and commonly the ones who never want to discuss this concept of death.
Yeah.
And I can't necessarily blame them themselves, because that is the system in over hundreds and hundreds of years that we've evolved into. So for all the advances we've made in technology and science and just society in general, we fucked this one up real well.
Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance. You know, like you have the two polarities of like being self-serving and greed, and then you have the other side of it of being giving and just asking, how do I live for others? And you know, it is what it is. Both sides are the energies that they are. You could either be greedy in a specific moment or be giving. But I've found that I'm trying to just embody a balance of both, because what I've found in my life is if I'm constantly giving to others, if I'm constantly focusing on, oh, this person has this problem, oh, I got to find them a solution, or this person has this problem, and then I'm like scatterbrained. I spread myself too thin. Where's me? Where's
Right.
my needs? I'm like giving all this energy into things, and I'm like losing myself. So
And your balance is your balance.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Just personally, like through introspection, like what balance feels right for any person. So,
Yeah.
like for me, I take care of myself. Like I'm always trying to find time, like, okay, this is what I need to do for me. And then, oh, okay, I feel good. I feel whole. Let me try to help someone else and pass this energy on. So I think there's a flux, and yeah.
Awesome. All right, Derek. Well, tell us where people can find you and website and all that good stuff.
The book, the podcast, the website are all Tea Time with the Reaper. That includes Instagram and Facebook. Twitter is teatime_Reaper. But if you just use that incredibly new and hard to use website called Google and type in Tea Time with the Reaper, you'll find your way to where you need to be.
Nice, nice. Do you have any more books or any other ideas coming up?
Well, the producer of the podcast, Biff, he and I are going to start discussing season 2. Very similar format, but we want to try and get guests that are higher profile,
Nice.
whether they be actors or athletes or people kind of in that echelon of celebrity. Not that their stories are going to be different, but it'll get more people to listen, which will mean getting more people to talk about this topic.
Right.
And then I've about halfway through a second book. It's going to be shorter, so it's going to be probably closer to a booklet than a book. Trying to address some of the key factors of the aftermath that people who are still here should expect or may be faced with after
Nice.
someone who matters dies.
Yeah, yeah. Any quick little secret tips that you have for us today?
The only secret is have that fucking conversation. I don't care how you start it. You can use me. Hey, I heard a guy on a podcast and all he wants to do is talk about death. Start the conversation some way with the people who matter, whether it's grandparents or parents or siblings or partners, loved ones, friends, whatever. You can't talk about this too much.
Right.
You can't. You will learn more about that person and what they want for their life and their death. Things become a lot clearer the more this becomes a topic that's you're comfortable with. That's
Right.
the secret. Talk
Yeah.
about it.
And absolutely, once your family member or loved one is in the hospital bed or even the casket, it's
Too late.
Too late.
Yep.
All right, Derek. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and
Gentlemen, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Till next time.
You got it.
Thank you for watching the Death Science Podcast. For updates and new episodes, subscribe right now. It's quick at deathscience.org. Remember that we all must die one day, so talk to your loved ones now about your post-life plans for your body. Learn more about creative and beneficial post-life plans at restinggrounds.org. I'm your host, Jeremy, signing off of another episode. Thank you, and memento mori.